footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook, bring you our preview of the 2013 Music City Bowl between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Now let's take a look at some keys to victory for both teams, starting with the Ole Miss.
Ole Miss comes into this bowl game with a 7-5 record and one of the youngest teams in the country. Now, offensively, the Rebels spread the field and they force the defense to match up with their speed and to consistently make plays in space. Versus Georgia Tech, look for the Rebels to work the quick game, the horizontal game, to try to neutralize that Georgia Tech pass rush. But even with that said, they cannot abandon the running game. Will have to strike some semblance of balance in order to be effective. Defensively versus Georgia Tech, the key to stopping the option has to be broken down into sections. First, you have to do your job. The dive guy, take the dive guy. The quarterback man, take the quarterback. And the pitch man, take the pitch. Second, you have to get off blocks and not get trapped or cut. And finally, you can't fall asleep in the secondary. If defensively, Ole Miss can do all of these things with that athleticism that they have on that side of the football and can play with discipline, they can definitely be successful versus Yellow Jackets. Now let's move over to Georgia Tech in this ball game, and the Yellow Jackets are a football team on offense that does a great job in taking the air out of the football. Now versus Ole Miss, I believe the focus early will be to test that Rebels secondary by taking some shots downfield to DeAndre Smelter and Darren Walker by setting up those Rebels defensive backs with double moves to try to build an early lead to put Ole Miss in a press mode. Defensively, the Yellow Jackets have done a great job versus the run all season long, but versus Ole Miss, the secondary will have to win the individual battles all day. The biggest matchup, in my opinion, will be between cornerback Lewis Young and Laquan Treadwell, the outstanding freshman receiver for Ole Miss. It'll also be interesting to see how much defensive coordinator Ted Roof uses the talent of free safety Jamia Thomas in man coverage either on Treadwell or Dante Moncrief, but regardless, overall, the pass defense will have to have a huge game versus Ole Miss. The X factor in this ball game for Ole Miss will be their red zone offense. They can move the football 20-20, but once they get inside the red zone, they have struggled to put the ball in the end zone. That can't happen versus Georgia Tech because you're going to have to maximize your offensive possession, so it's important that they come away with 7 instead of 3 inside the red zone. And the X factor for the Yellow Jackets will be their pass defense. Ole Miss will try to come into this football game and make you cover every blade of grass. They'll attack you horizontally as well as vertically. So that pass defense has to bring their A game in order for the Yellow Jackets to have success overall defensively. Now here are some coaching points for both teams in this ball game. For Ole Miss, they're going to have to communicate up front along that offensive line. They have to be able to recognize stunts and pick up the blitz versus Georgia Tech. Otherwise, they can struggle to try to protect Bo Wallace in the pocket. And they have to play Yellow Jackets football. That's forcing that defense to play horizontally and forcing them to make decisions on the fly. You have to play that misdirection game that they do with their option attack, but with your own offense. They do a great job in influence plays with traps, the counters, the quick screens. Those type of plays can be successful versus Georgia Tech. The defensive tackles, in my opinion, must control the line of scrimmage. That's one way, like I mentioned before, to slow down the option you have to win on the inside defensively. Now for Georgia Tech in this ball game, ball security is first and foremost. The kryptonite to an option offense is turnovers, and if they can protect the football, they can definitely win this ball game. And they have to win on the edges defensively. You want to keep that Ole Miss offense contained, tackle to tackle, especially in the running game with Bo Wallace and the tailback. You want to keep those guys funneled in tackle to tackle, and you can have success forcing them to play downhill and not horizontally. And you have to stay in the game mentally if you're Georgia Tech. That's a big key right there versus Ole Miss, who will try to take advantage of your ability to stay disciplined, just like Georgia Tech does with the option attack. Ole Miss does it with the passing game. So on the back end, you have to stay in the game in order to be successful. Now here are some 2014 draft prospects you want to keep an eye on in this ball game. For Ole Miss, wide receiver Dante Moncrief is a junior, but has the size and the skill set that you want at the next level. 6'3", 225, reminds me a lot of Michael Floyd. Linebacker Mike Murray does a great job on both ends of defense in running support and also dropping back in pass coverage. And I'm very fond of cornerback Charles Sawyer, outstanding player at 5'11", 180, maybe closer to 175, but definitely can play big time ball at the next level. And I'm a big fan of returner Jeff Scott, 5'7", 165 with lightning speed. And for Georgia Tech in this ball game, linebacker Jeremiah Tawacho is one of the best pure linebackers in the country. I think he's very athletic. A lot of people don't give him credit for his athleticism at 6'3", 245. And Jermaine Thomas is a player that can play corner or safety. Definitely the versatility that you want on the back end. And keep an eye on Lewis Young, underrated player for Georgia Tech on the defense side of the ball. Long arms at 6'1", 196. And Will Jackson is a guy, in my opinion, that can play both guard as well as tackle at the next level. In the 2007 Music City Bowl, Kentucky took on Florida State, and led by All-SEC quarterback Andre Woodson, the resurgent 2007 Wildcats were able to cap a fantastic season by knocking off Florida State 35-28. Woodson was named game MVP with 4 touchdown passes. In the 1960 Sugar Bowl, Ole Miss took on LSU in a revenge game, as it was on Halloween night that LSU's running back Billy Cannon made the memorable punt return for a touchdown to knock off Ole Miss. And in this game, the Rebels defense held Cannon, who won the Heisman Trophy that year, to 8 yards rushing, shutting out LSU 21-0, ending their bid for back-to-back national titles. In the 1985 All-American Bowl, Georgia Tech took on Michigan State in what was a tough and close game throughout. Michigan State running back Lorenzo White's fumble, which was recovered by All-American defensive end Pat Swilling, gave the Yellow Jackets life as they drove down the field, and with the Malcolm King touchdown, was able to upset the favorite Spartans 17-14. Freddie Joe Young was an outstanding defensive end for Ole Miss from 1981 to 1984. He was an All-American in '84 and a 2-time first-team All-SEC performer, and finished his Rebel career with over 300 tackles. Quarterback Billy Lothridge is definitely a campus legend. Head coach Bobby Dodd called him the best quarterback he's ever coached. He finished second in the Heisman Trophy voting in 1963, was a 2-time All-American, and led the SEC in touchdown passes also in 1963. I like Georgia Tech in this ball game. I like the way they can run the football and own the TOP. That's a given, but defensively, I think they're stout. I think they're sound. Now, I do believe their secondary will show up big versus Ole Miss and take care of business. So I like Georgia Tech to win the 2013 Music City Bowl.